Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and we're into the final few weeks of your SuperCoach season for 2024. League finals are fast approaching. Those pursuing rankings glory have just got a couple more weeks to be able to hold on or surge to be able to see you get to the dream destination for your 2024 SuperCoach season. But in these final few weeks, it can be won or lost, and we are here to help you on our strategy roundtable navigate the big decisions and potential discussion points that you've got to think through as we head into Friday night's lockout. Joining me on this episode, he's basically been on the injury list for what has felt like a Callum Mills length of time, but finally he's back. Hopefully he doesn't go full Mills and do nothing for most of it. It's Mini Monk. Good to have you back, my friend.
It's good to be back. It wasn't a Mad Monday type injury, thankfully. I haven't popped a shoulder. I haven't gotten a long-term injury. I've just had a bit on outside of fantasy with my life, but I'm back. I'll be back on the fantasy podcast soon enough as well. So for those of you who've been desperately waiting to hear my dulcet tones, you won't have to wait too much longer.
Oh, very, very good to have you back on deck. And then a man that's a regular part of the Dr SuperCoach team. He's an expert in analysis in a bunch of different areas, from how you understand fixtures, how you understand formats of games, how it plays, really, really helping us in the SuperCoach community, specifically around the area of captains for 2024. Pig Mentality has been a part of the Coaches Panel podcast a number of times this year already. Mate, nice to have you back on the podcast yet again.
Thanks, MJ. It's always good to be here, nice and welcoming, and pleasure to jump on with Mini Monk as well. We've spoken a few times on Twitter and DMs and given each other advice, so it's nice to be able to jump on and chat in person.
Definitely agree with that. It's good to be able to catch you for a podcast finally after all the conversations that we've had, well, through X, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's this interesting point of the season for SuperCoach for us. The vast majority of the SuperCoach community would have a team that they would use the word, and maybe it's loosely, but the word complete around it. That might not feel like it looking at some of the scoring, but we have that greater sense that if this is what my team looks like for the next 6 weeks, okay. And we've seen our trades that we've used very aggressively for the first 3 quarters of the season. The boosts for, I think, pretty much every coach are well and truly a thing of the past. And we now could probably count our trades on one hand. There might be a few coaches that have got them reaching to the second hand and counting on the piggy, but for the most part, not only are we into the final 5 trades, but potentially the last 1, 2. And it feels like if you've got 3, you might be in luxury trade phases of your SuperCoach. And so there's a number of conversations I want to have with you both. I do want to talk about downgrade targets a little bit later on. Maybe not so much about who to get, but why and how we should be using them. I want to talk about the final 6 weeks and what are we fixture forecasting. It's one of the great things about having Pig Mentality from the Dr SuperCoach team on this episode is he's so good at helping us understand these trends, both players with good and bad runs. I want to talk about that. And then there's 2 sides of a trading coin that I want to ask you both. We've got injured players and we've got underperforming premiums. And I'll spend a bit of time on both, but I want to talk about when is it worth the time to pull the trigger and hit that T button on what could be your last trade or second last trade. So maybe we start with the injured or the out of side players at the moment. They feel to some degree a little more cut and dry, but I want to put 4 players, maybe 5 on the radar. And I'm keen, maybe Pig Mentality will start with you. I know Mini Monk, you'll have some thoughts on this, but there's 5 guys of varying importance that the community and SuperCoach have had this year that didn't play last week. Some might play this week. Some might be another week to go. Let me give you some names and then let's help coaches navigate these players. Max Gawn, He's a test for this week. Crazy healing powers. We thought 2 to 3 weeks. He could be back as early as this week and missed just one. Zach Fisher, he's fit. He played VFL, but a lot of coaches were hoping he comes back really, really soon. Tuke Miller, probably unlikely this week, but could be back as early as the week after that. Treloar was a late out, but looks probable. And then Jeremy McGovern, I know he's not playing this week, but seemed very touch and go that it was like, oh, one more week should be enough. And so, Pig, what do we do with these 5 guys that 6 weeks left to go in the year? Let's assume they're not named this week, and potentially as people are watching or listening to this episode, they know. If any of those guys aren't named this week, who are we pulling the trade trigger on? And who are we thinking, no, we might need to look and hold and keep the faith a little bit more?
Well, I do think that team announcements will make some of the decisions for us potentially, or hopefully. Gawn being back would be a huge return. If he misses this week, if you've held him now, I would probably still hold him. They said 2 to 3, but he was saying, no, it'll just be 1. So somewhere in the middle, he'll either miss this week. If he misses this week, I think he would be back next week. So then you got 5 weeks of Max Gawn as potentially slightly unique as well for Supercoach finals, which is a bit of an exciting prospect. And Melbourne actually have a really nice run for the next 5 for Ruck. So if he does come back and is at full health, I think he should put up some good scoring. So him I'd hold. Fisher's an interesting one because he was healthy and he could have played AFL. They just didn't select him. But is that Clarkson? Like Clarkson also made McKercher have a run in the 2s before he came back. Is he doing that with Fisher, or is Fisher just on the outer? I'm not really sure. I mean, all our North fans in our Slack have no idea either. I don't really know what the go is. So hopefully he's back this week and makes the decision for us. I would like to hold him because I think he is, one of the top 6 forwards, or at least close enough. There's a lot of bad forwards that you could get. He at least feels safe-ish. McGovern, I think you could hold now. I traded him last week because I would have copped a donut if I held him, and I'm kind of happy with that. But if you held him now, I think from their word, it is probably only 1 more week, and I still think he's around the top 6 defenders, so I'm happy with that. Same with Treloar. If it was just a calf niggle, that is kind of an old man injury. It could re-flare up, but he was killing it before then, so I'd probably hold him. Tuke is the one I think I would get rid of. It's a longer time frame. Like there are even reports saying it could be the season, but then there's some reports saying it could be this week or next. So I don't know. There's a lot of conjecture going around with Tuke Miller, but even when he's back, he hasn't been good. I don't have his averages in front of me, but he's probably going below 100 for the last 3 or 5. So the other 4 that I've talked about keeping is because they're kind of close enough to top of their line. Tuke, I'd just get rid of him. The time frame's unknown, and he's not that close to top of his line.
No,
so
he's got a seasonal average of 103, but his last 5 he was going at 83. So you're right. There's just nowhere. You don't want that recency score. Even a 103 at this point in time does feel like not quite enough at your M8 spot, does it?
Yeah. So, that's how I'm thinking. The 4 that could come back next week, I'd probably be holding because they're close enough to the top. Tuke, I'm happy to punt.
Yeah.
Minnie, I'm curious for you. How much does your bench hygiene inform the decision? So Pigs talked about, excuse me, players that have ceiling and near top of their line. That's obviously a significant factor. Does your bench hygiene as options of depth and coverage, let alone then the number of trades you've got left, how much do you put those 3 ingredients together to inform who to trade, who to fade, and who to just go, oh, I'll just cop it on the chin?
It absolutely does. I mean, it's about who you've got playing as rookies or even potentially as a 23rd premium. It's about the DPP flexibility that you have as well. If Gawn were to miss this week, but you've got Jackson that you can DPP and play him in your ruck line and you've got someone covering, it's an entirely different prospect to copping a donut in your R2 spot because Gawn misses another week. If you've got Billy Dowling playing on Friday night, you can have him in your midfield or in your forward line to cover the likes of Treloar or Fisher, depending on who you need to cover and who might not be playing. We might not know by Fisher at that point. There's every chance that he comes back as the sub. He's done that a couple of times this year. He's played as a sub once this year. It's something to be concerned about for sure. They could definitely ease him back in that way. But if you've got Dowling and you can see his score on Friday night before making a decision, it helps a lot. But if you are cupboards bare, I've got 102.4k players just stacked up on the bench, don't have any cover, you probably need to consider moving, because 6 weeks of a 95 compared to 5 weeks of an 110, it's not far off. Especially if these guys are underperforming. It's pretty even. I think I agree with Pig's assessment about most of the players. I'd be pretty comfortable holding Gawn, especially if you've got a way to cover his score. Fisher as well. Treloar probably as well. McGovern's the one where I'm a bit less certain on. They have said that he's missing this week. I'd still be hesitant to say that he is back next week. And potentially that means you're going at 6 weeks versus 4 weeks. The others, Gawn, he's going to try and be back. He's the captain of that club. They're going to try and push for a finals berth. He probably needs to be there for them to actually make it. Fisher, he's fit. Whether or not he's in their best 22 or best 23 remains to be seen, and we'll find that out at teams. But I think that's kind of where I sit with those 5 players.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
They're an interesting bunch. And then probably the other layer of complexity that coaches have alongside these close enough to top end scorers that you've alluded to kind of capturing is we've got guys that at various points of the season have been around the mark of our top tier of scoring in specific lines. I want to walk you through a number of different players that their recent scoring history, it feels a distant memory to either what their seasonal average is or what we might have paid for them at various points of the year, expecting them to be premiums. And I want to list these names for you, go through their most recent averages, and I want to get your boys' take on, is it worth moving them on or not? Again, I know there's a lot of complexity and variables in there. Are you going for league? Are you going for rankings? Have you got many trades left? Have you not? Have you got decent cover or not? Does the fixtures early in the week give you options? I know these are the stacked variables are there. So it's always dangerous to give definitive answers, but why not? Let's put you both in these uncomfortable positions to give definitive answers. But let me walk you through a couple of these players. I might throw 3 or 4 of them to you, Pig, and then a couple of them to you, Mini Monk. So for you, Pig, we'll start off Matt Rowell. His last 3, he's going at 74. Like, I think after the first 2 months of the season, if he wasn't the number 1 SuperCoach scorer, he was definitely on the podium. And he's a shell of himself over the last 2 months. I know there's a few tons in there, but the last 3 is rookie scoring. Brodie Grundy. Yep, I'm heading you into the ruck territory. We're going to turn you into the ruck specialist as well as the captains. He's been okay his last 3, but he's going at 99. You could probably throw English in that same consideration. He's fine, but his last 3 is 97. And then the last one I want to give you is Dan Houston. I know he's coming off a low ton, but before that, it's still a 3-round average of 83. So you've got those guys, Rowell, Grundy, English, Houston. Are you moving on any of these guys? And if you are, what's the priority and what are the factors you're looking to move on to?
I might start with the ones that I'd be keen to keep. So Grundy and English, I'd be pretty fine holding both of those guys. I mean, I've owned English all year. I paid over 700k for him. It's been one of my biggest regrets. But having said that, he's still, I believe in his last 5 when I was looking at it, there's still 2 130s in there. And I wouldn't be surprised if he puts a 130 this week if it's Sam De Koning continues rucking, because last week I think Sam De Koning had 5 hitouts to Darcy Cameron's 58. So if English can get a share of those, he should score well. So that, I think, hopefully we get a bit instant reward. They're both close enough. Like, there are some ruckmen going a fair bit better than that. Like when we look at Nank, Cherry, even they weren't amazing. They were sort of like 90s to low tons this week. So it's not like you're getting a massive, massive upgrade. Maybe if Gawn comes back, he goes on a 130 stretch, but, he's coming off an injury as well. So maybe not. So, I think those two, I think it'd be a bit of a waste of a trade, to be honest, to go to someone else. And you might even need to find money, like to go to English to Nank, you would. So those two I wouldn't. Houston, I'm quite keen to hold. I own him. It's been a roller coaster, but I love owning Dan Houston. He has Richmond this week, I believe. So that's probably going to be a spike score for him. A couple of his defender counterparts are injured as well. So he's probably going to have the lion's share. I haven't actually done my captaincy research yet, but I'm pretty confident Dan Houston will be in it just because of that matchup. So I wouldn't want to be trading someone who has the best matchup and is going to have the lion's share of the ball. But even if we look at Houston kind of for the rest of the year, Port actually have the best run home for designated kickers, which is what he does. That's kind of the guys that take the kick outs and then they want the ball in their hands. And he finishes with 2 green matchups in Adelaide and Freo, in the SuperCoach finals. So Houston, I'm very keen on holding because I think he's top 6 or at least close enough. Rao's a really interesting one, and I am lucky that I don't own him, but it looks pretty frustrating for those that do, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone for moving him on. I think he just hasn't been himself. Even with Took out, he hasn't lifted. The thing I have with Rao is he's now so cheap. Like, who are you going to? You probably got to use 2 trades to get to someone that's like better. Like if you want to get to, I don't know who it is, even a Patrick Cripps or someone like that, that's not destroying it, but still pretty solid. It's a lot of money. So you probably need 2 trades to do it. If you have 1 trade, I was looking guys around his price, and I don't think there's anyone around his price that I would want. You still even need a bit of money to go to like a Chad Warner, and he's not necessarily that much better, especially because he's a tag risk. So if you had enough trades, I would try and move Rao, but you probably want to try and go to one of the good guys and not just settle for. I mean, you could do Rao to Clary, but that's probably just compounding your issue.
It does feel like it's almost just asking for more of the same. I know Rosie might have been a nice sort of make a skerrick of cash maybe a couple of weeks ago, but even if you're dropping 100K on top of Matt Rowell at the moment, just looking at some names that have the appeal to us of some SuperCoach scoring pedigree. Sam Walsh, but he's gone at 104 in his last 3, so he's fine. But is it worth dropping 100K on? Rory Laird, again, another 100K on top of him. Yeah, decent score last week with a ton, flat one, but still only 104 in his last 3. Treloar, you're coming off that, missing a game due to the calf concern, and that's like another 120K. Brayshaw is, maybe only 60, 70K, but 104 in his last 3. And so you're right, it is that interesting spot of you basically need to find another 200K to get up towards the 600K boys. And even then, you're like, not quite getting to Bont for those that might still not have him, not quite getting to Goulden. So it's a tough spot to be if you've got no cash and no real trade luxury space to be in.
Yeah, I think out of the names you mentioned, Rosie is probably the one I'm most comfortable in. I don't think he's really getting a tag. I started with him thinking he's pretty close to a 110 guy, and I've kind of back to that mindset. So he's someone I would like to be able to get routed to if someone has him, but like there's a fair bit of cash between them now, and whether you can do that in 1 or 2 trades might determine whether you should as well, because a lot of people have now gone down to 0 trades. I'm seeing a lot of teams with 0. I've personally got 1, and that makes me queasy. So I wouldn't really want to go down too much. Out of interest, how many trades do you 2 have left?
I was going to say you're queasy at 1. I am empty.
You're both empty.
I am running on fumes.
No, I got 3. I've somehow sucked 3. But my ranking
Wow.
probably reflects that I've still got 3 trades left.
It's all right. You're playing for league finals, MJ.
Yeah, that's what I'll tell myself. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, just to wrap that up, I'd be pretty keen to hold Grundy, English, and Houston. Rowell, I would like people to get rid of, but it's just a who and how.
Yeah, okay. So there's 3 other guys I'm interested on your take, Minnie, and I've held off on 2 because I know, one, you're very Fremantle supporting base, but you're also objective about them too. So that's what I like about that. Caleb Sarong started the year on fire. And Seal got a seasonal average of 116, but his last 3, he's down at 89. There are some tons in the last 2 months. Maybe not the captaincy level of scoring that we saw at the start of the year. So he's in the mix of, 527, people paid over 600K for. A little bit frustrating. Gosh, if you trade it into both Rowell and Sarong, sort of at round 8, 9, 10, that's a headache. So Sarong's in there. While we're staying in the midfield, Jordan Dawson, again, premium price at the start of the year, perceptual value, sort of a couple months into the year, but the last 3 of 87 and a poor scoring history away from Adelaide Oval, and you've got to launch early into Friday night and make that decision. It does make it hard. And then the other one, look, this might be a little bit harsh to put him in there, given for 95% of the season, Luke Ryan's been the number 1 defender for us. And his recent couple of weeks been okay, but a last 5 average of 97 is still a long way shy of what we become accustomed to, which was safe 115. So what's your thoughts on these 3 guys? So Dawson, Sarong, and Ryan Mini-Monk. Are any of them worth moving on? And is there anything about what's to come for them that might give us either some optimism or some fear to jump off them?
I'll start with the easiest of the 3 I think to describe, which I actually think is Caleb Sarong. His last 5, he's gone 96 versus the Dogs, 121 against the Suns, 85 against the Swans, 84 against Richmond, and 99 against Hawthorn. So, not really that much of a ceiling, not a terrible floor. He's still managing to scrape to 80s, but the context needs to be there in that Dogs at Marvel, not an easy matchup. They're a very good inside midfield team, very hard to score against. Gold Coast, good game, scored fine. Sydney at SCG, he had a very good first half. They paid a bit more attention to him in the second half to slow him down a bit. And then that led into the full game tag against Richmond, which really hampered his scoring and his ability to be able to get off the chain. And we actually saw that the one who got off the chain in that game was Brayshaw. He went absolutely massive, was everywhere on the ground because the claps were on Sarong. And then last week against Hawthorn down at UTAS, Hawthorn have sneakily become one of the hardest midfields to actually score against. They are super duper restrictive to get to a near ton, especially down at UTAS. And then you just have to look at what they've got on the run home. They have 4 games at Optus Stadium in their last 6. They have the games against Melbourne, who don't have Petrarca and maybe don't have Gawn this week, against West Coast, who have a new coach, against Essendon at the MCG, who are coming into a bit more form, but it's not the worst place to be able to score. Geelong at Optus, who again, one of the more friendly inside midfield matchups to go against. The last 2 are a bit scarier against GWS at NG Stadium and then Port Adelaide at home. But by that point, he might have hurt you enough. And if there's a player that can go 160, 170 on any given week, I wouldn't be too surprised if he were to pull one of those scores out of the hat in the next 4 weeks as Freo trying to really cement a final spot. And the same could almost apply to Jordan Dawson on their run home as well. I mean, he's the captain of their club. They need to actually show something to get the supporter base behind them. They have tried a few things, including actually giving him more CBAs on the weekend compared to how many he'd been getting recently. If that sticks with their fixture run, it's probably okay. He's in a very similar bucket to Rao, though, where his price is so low that it might cost you 2 trades to get to anywhere that you really want to go to. I currently have him. As I said before, I'm out of trades, but he's probably not one that I'd be looking to move. And I think the same has to apply to Luke Ryan. I mean, he still managed a 98 last week, and I think Freako put out a tweet saying it's his first game in 149 games where he hadn't recorded an intercept possession, which is so unlike Luke Ryan. they've got, the run that I was just talking about in terms of fixture. It's pretty good for general defenders as well, or even intercepting defenders. And the return of Alex Pearce means that Freo go back to their favoured back 6, back 7 setup, which allows him to get off the chain, allows him to be playing as that third tall and playing loose, which is how he was able to accumulate a lot of his bigger scores earlier on the season, despite Cox not being there. I think that he's an easy hold as well. So if I was ordering them in terms of who I'd be most likely to hold, it'd probably be Sarong, then Ryan, then Dawson. But I would probably...
Deciding which credit card or loan is right for you is like trying to choose where you want to eat for dinner. Except when you finally get to the restaurant, the menu's riddled with jargon that no average foodie could understand. So at Credit Karma, we keep things simple. We show you personalized recommendations that align with your money goals and help you turn the confusing fine print into terms you can actually understand. And as a cherry on top, we provide a detailed overview for a new card or loan before you apply. That way, we can help you make decisions faster and with more confidence. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
Be holding all three of them, especially at this time of the year when we're trying to avoid donuts more than we're trying to avoid poor scores.
Yeah, and that's that interesting space, isn't it? And then you put the variable on top of that is, if you're going for rankings, when do you pull the trigger on that precious final trade or two, if you even have them at all, obviously, as opposed to leagues where you're a week or two from finals. Are you desperate to win your league? Do you have to pull the trigger now? Will that trade be more valuable in that league matchup in a fortnight's time? Or are you trying to hope and hold you can get deeper into your finals push to be able to go, then I'll get rid of my out of form Matt Rowell and use the 150K I might have saved in the kitty. And then maybe I might be able to afford a bottomed out Chad Warner, for example, like trying to find the timing pig mentality is, we're going to talk about fixtures in a moment and who's got hot and cold runs, but that is that complexity, isn't it? For coaches that have different mindsets and motivations. For the few of us that aren't where Mini Monk is, which is don't even get to think about trades. I'm thinking about 2025 trades and VC and C and the odd loophole is basically all I've got to do. But for those with 1, 2, 3 or 4 trades left, when you hit the go button now, you really want it to count. You can't waste any more of these trades, can you?
Yeah, so I think we are definitely saving trades, and I think even for Classic, like having one trade left with 2 weeks out, you can still make 100 points or something just in that 2 weeks by, like I know last year we were talking about a lot of us had Darcy Cameron just giving us 50s. If you had flipped him in the 2 weeks for Tex Walker, who was gunning for that Coleman, that probably made you 150 points just from that trade. And you don't want to get a key forward necessarily too far out, but if you get a key forward with just 2 rounds left that's hunting for the Coleman or something like that, that's, that can make you a lot of points. Or if there's another injury 4 weeks out and you're going to cop a donut, it's really valuable then rather than flipping a Row to a Chad or something like that.
Or imagine you can just let a Billy Dowling sit at F7 for the next 3 or 4 weeks. He can get to 400K. You can use that to flip him on your last trade if you want to, and have a go at getting a key forward pop score in round 24. Like, we don't know the fixture yet, but say it's a Kerner or Mackay coming up against St Kilda, or say it's a Jeremy Cameron coming up against West Coast in round 24. There's the potential that they go 150 and you can loop that score on in your forward line. Like, there's a chance that it's a sideways trade at that point from someone like Dowling to be able to get the key forward of your choice. And that's a great spot to be in going into the last round. Like, that can be 80, 90, 100 points if you nail the right one.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So as we try to get into these final 6 weeks of the year, I want to look at these fixtures, and both of you are really, really good at helping us unpack hot and cold trends. And it's not just for those that have got trades, because maybe you're listening and you're hearing Mini Monk talk about no trades and you're like going, yeah, I'm like that. Well, the good news is still with fixtures, whether it be for your captaincy or vice captaincy decisions, and Pig Mentality's video out on YouTube on the Dr SuperCoach channel helps us a lot with that. These fixture trends of who's in current form really can inform a lot of decisions. You mentioned earlier, Mini Monk, around Hawthorn being restrictive at the moment. They're top 3 most restrictive teams for midfield over the last 5 weeks, whereas we're seeing for inside mids, Collingwood, West Coast, Adelaide over the last 5 weeks are a really, really favourable matchup. And then for designated kickers, well, Fremantle are still one of the most favourable matchups. So you mentioned a Luke Ryan, if they go back to this returning structure of the start of the year with the captain back in the team, well, that opens up everything. Whereas Bailey Dale's historically been a really good option for us and was valued, but they're probably the worst for designated kickers at the moment. So even just understanding this does inform a bunch of different things for us. So what are the trends you're both seeing? Maybe Pig Mentality will start with you. Who are the teams that you're inclined to lean into, or the teams is probably too easy to look at it? What are the specific matchups for our mids, for our rucks, for our forwards, for these positions that were like, sound the alarm for us on a couple of teams or players that we need to be careful of, and give us some optimism for maybe some either trade ins or a VCC option that could really pop a big score that you're seeing that's going to help us over these final 6 weeks of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've gone a little bit further and gone into some players that kind of have a really nice final 4 weeks. So this might be for people trying to win their leagues. It might be for those looking for a little ranking boost at the end, whatever it might be. Some nice matchups to end the year. So if we look at forwards, there's 3 kind of small forwards that I don't mind. Dylan Moore has a really nice run to end the year, including finishing with Richmond and North in the last 2 weeks of Supercoach. So let's say Zach Fisher doesn't make it back or something, him to Moore could be a nice little flip. Alex Neil-Bullen and Melbourne have a really nice finish. That's a bit of an out there one, but he's actually been pretty solid this year. A lot of these guys I'll mention, people that play draft are probably already aware of them. They're already probably doing quite well in draft, and if they are on your waiver, that might be an option as well. Shea Bolton actually has a really nice last 4, or any Richmond forward. I mean, he's not in form, but so you'd want to see something for him before you trade him in. But North, St Kilda, Hawthorn, Gold Coast in his last 4 is pretty good. I then looked at the key forwards, like I was just talking about. There's about 5 or 6 guys kind of in that Coleman race, and we know that they will be trying to kick goals, especially in the last few weeks. And they might give us some really big spike scores. Ben King is one that really interests me. His last 4, he's got West Coast, which is easy. Essendon a bit harder, but then he has Melbourne and Richmond as well. And he's in the top 5 for the Coleman. So I think he's going to come home hot. Nick Lark, he's not in great form, but he does have a really nice run with Richmond and West Coast in his last 4. As Monk touched on before, Jeremy Cameron has a nice 2, finishing with St Kilda and West Coast. So maybe he's not necessarily gunning for the Coleman, but he still could come home strong. Colonel Mackay in the same boat have West Coast and St Kilda. So that could be 2 monster scores if either of them are still at the top of the table. Jesse Hogan is up there, but he's got Freo Bulldogs. That's a bit harder. But, they might still just be feeding him if he's actually a chance to win it. So that's kind of who I wouldn't be trading these guys in now because they're still 6 weeks away, but just keep them, maybe put them on your radar. And if, 2 weeks out from Supercoach finals or 2 weeks into Supercoach finals and you've got your semi and your granny left, maybe a little play out Harry Mackay or Ben King could be something that interests you. If we go into mids, there are a few teams. St Kilda, North, Freo, Gold Coast have a really good final 4 rounds. So maybe that actually lends to holding Matt Rowell. I don't know. He's got 2 really hard ones before that. But if you do get through to the finals, he's there. So, St Kilda, you got Jack Steele. I don't know if you'd look to trade him into him, but does someone like Brad Hill or Mason Wood kind of come out of nowhere and, just at least give you hundreds for a cheap price? A lot of these guys are a bit cheaper, but maybe, I don't know, let's say you get a Chad Warner injury and he's only at 500K and you're like, oh, who do I get from that? Maybe someone like Mason Wood. North have a good run. There's obviously LDUs on the menu, but I think George Wardlaw could have a really nice final month. We know he's got some spikes. Freo have a really good final month, so obviously Sarong's a main candidate, but I actually think Andy Brayshaw could be a nice kind of finish home. Maybe Fife, I don't know. And then, like I said, with Gold Coast, so Rowell, maybe Anderson, yes. Who plays that next kind of third role? Is it Flanders? Is it Alex Davies once he's back from that suspension he just got? There could be someone random like that. Then if we move on to the ruck, there's actually a lot of our premium ruckmen have good finishes. So West Coast have the best run, but that's probably not really relevant. Maybe Matt Flynn in draft if he's back. I've got him in a draft league. I'm still waiting.
Holding on deeply.
But then it goes Carlton, Richmond, North, Hawthorn, Melbourne as kind of the easiest run. So Tom De Koning, if he becomes solo again, love that. Nank, love it. Cherry, Meek and Gawn all have really nice runs home. So they all could do some damage in the last month. So that's one reason for holding Gawn. But if you were to get rid of him, any of those names, I think Lloyd Meek's been pretty underrated for a lot of the years. So that's an option. And then I might just finish by talking about some defenders that have really nice runs. So if we look at wingers and attacking defenders, Nick Newman, by far the easiest run Carlton have. They've got an incredible run for defenders. Actually, 6 easy teams. No hard teams for them left. So it's North, Port, Collingwood, Hawthorn, West Coast, St Kilda. So that might also apply to Adam Sard, might also apply, maybe McGovern, or even, I was even thinking Jacob Wiedering can give you 100 every now and then. So his last 2 are West Coast and St Kilda. If you are really out of cash, maybe Jacob Wiedering could give you 200 points just as a bailout in those last 2 weeks. You've got Richmond. I don't really like, but the options are Jaden Short. Vlosten can pop some big scores every now and again. Adelaide, I'm a big Mitch Hinge fan. I actually called his breakout at the start of the year. It probably hasn't been as big as I thought, but he has been really good lately. He finishes with Bulldogs, Port and Sydney, who are all good for defenders. Geelong have a nice finish. Obviously, as I said with Jeremy Cameron, they finished with St Kilda and West Coast. So you might not be able to afford Max Holmes, but maybe a Zach Guthrie or a Mitch Duncan could maybe give you 200 points in 2 weeks. Like these aren't exciting names, but they might be bailout options if you've only got 400k and kind of just need to plug a hole. North also have a nice run, so you got Fisher, McKercher. Darcy Tucker's been really good in the last month, so there's a name for you. And then Brisbane's the only other one. They've got a really nice run, including St Kilda in round 21. So you'd want to kind of get them before that. That Zorko is really the only one I think that's kind of relevant, and most would have him. But if we're looking at defenders, if people are still wanting to trade McGovern out, Nick Newman is an insane option. I've been talking about probably since his buy, and I haven't been able to get him in, but it's a great run. So there's some names. A lot of them you probably wouldn't buy now. I wouldn't go out and say buy Zach Guthrie or Jacob Wiedering now. But if you get stuck with one trade left, you've got no money, someone gets injured with a week or 2 left, someone like that could bail you out. And having a look at the fixture is a good way to find someone that might kind of, just fill a hole for 2 weeks.
Some good. You got some thoughts off the back of that? I know Pig Mentality's done a great job breaking down for us who's got some really nice runs and where that kind of stops and starts and when to jump on and off. But is there anything you want to add into the mix of that fixture hot and cold run narrative, whether it's player specific or doubling down on a point that Pig's brought into the table for us?
No, I might complement it and talk about identifying when teams are shifting their game style as well. Like we talk about Hawthorn now being one of the more restrictive teams for inside midfielders. That just hasn't come out of the blue. That's been something that they've worked on for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. It's something that's come about with Will Day back into that midfield mix as well. They've also been able to deploy kind of Nash in a bit of a negating role, not quite a hard tag, but identifying when teams are implementing those types of game style shifts and what effect that's actually having on players, Essendon have started using Nick Martin much further up the ground than they did earlier on in the season. He's still being able to score quite well, but is there a bit of cause of concern there with his scoring in the future? Maybe. And then also looking at what teams have to play for on the run home as well. Like we have got one of the tightest run homes in terms of teams vying for final spots that I can ever remember, and that probably might be what the AFL is wanting. They'd be salivating at the fact that there's only 2 matches separating 2nd to 13th place. 13 teams on the ladder are essentially vying for a spot on the top 8 week in, week out. But what about those other 5 teams? Do they have much to play for? Are they actually playing for pride? Are they playing to try and change things up? Are they trying to develop younger players? Do we see Richmond, West Coast, Adelaide start to blood in some youth and potentially allow more scores against them because they're playing players that are a little bit more inexperienced? That might be where you look to target. Look for a team that has, 3 or 4 matchups against that bottom 5 set of teams on the run home and maybe try and exploit that. But do your homework and have a look and see what's changed. DFS is a great tool now. They've expanded into looking at what the SuperCoach scoring is for different positions over the last 5 and last 10 matches, which is an absolute godsend for anyone who's wanting to target fixtures for 1 week, let alone for a 6-week period. And have a think about it. Try and use some of your intuition, see what you think is going to change, and see which players you think have that ceiling potential. I mean, I traded into Lachie Whitfield instead of Nick Newman last week because I think that he's a player that can burn with his ceiling. And that's not to say that I didn't think that Nick Newman had a good run, but both players have definitely got, viability as to why you could trade into them. And sometimes it might just be with that little bit of cash you can do with that last move is. Like if you might only be able to get to someone that's 550 and the player that you really want is 560. So you just have to go for that little bit more of a dig into the player that you actually can get.
Yeah.
Listen in. Starbucks. It's a great day for coffee.
Super helpful. One last question I want to ask you boys before we do wrap up this strategy roundtable is the coaches that have more than one trade left might be looking at freeing up some cash. We've used Raul as an illustration point. It's not to drive the point home to say you have to trade him, but using him as our conversational basis more so than anything else is which of these sort of downgrade options should we be pursuing right now? Should we just be going to the bottom of the barrel, whether they play or not, kind of doesn't matter. We're just trying to skim as much cash off as we can so that, to Mini Monk's point, we're not stuck in these little $5,000 to $8,000. I've just got to settle for what I got to do. Do we take still the guy that's got the best break even and play the game like we did in the first half to 2/3 of the season, which is that trading cadence of who's been in there for a couple of weeks, they're on the bubble, we're going to jump on them? Or are we, so putting like a Zach Taylor for sake of example, I know he's played more than that with the sub-affected games, but really his price point is there where it's like, okay, he's basically a not bottom price, but a reasonable bottom price option. And then you've got the next tier up of rookies, which is, well, they're scoring okay, but you're going to pay for it now, like a Lawson Humphreys. So my question is, if we are in that position of downgrading, what are we factored more? Is it don't need the cash, get anyone? Is it play more traditional, run the break-even game and who's there at a reasonable price? Or are we happy to pay up a little bit more for the Humphreys type? What should be the lead and the lag indicators for us here in this decision for the coaches that are trading down to free up some cash?
It's how many trades you have left. It's who's the player that you want to bring in, who are you trading out, and what cover do you currently have? Like if you've got, maybe 2 green dots on your bench, say it's players like an Evans or a Humphreys or a Dowling or a Manor, maybe one of them's got DPP so you can cover your mid and your forward line should you have a laid out. That might be enough for you to say, stuff it, I'm going to save that extra 20K. I'm going to go to the player that I want. I've got 4 trades. I've got 2 trades to use if someone's a laid out. It can put me in a comfortable position because that 20K might be the difference between settling on a player you think is close enough and settling on a player that you could potentially captain maybe a couple of times on the run home and get you an extra 30, 40 points that way. It can be the difference in your league matchup between winning a final and losing one. It can be the difference in 100 ranks come the end of the year, let alone, with how tight the season, it can easily be 200 ranks, 40 points. I tend to, and I've tried it a lot more, I've tried the reverse this year, but I tended to settle and play more for rookies that had job security, had scoring last year. This year, I've gone for a bit of a different approach. I went for those 102 type guys. I've thankfully lucked into Logan Evans more than anything with him being 102 and popping out some okay scores at D6. If you can find one of those 102 guys that might have some semblance of job security. I don't think there's really any that are coming through, unfortunately. Or at least provide you with, say, loophole potential or DPP or just something to be able to add some flexibility to your team. That's the way that I tend to lean, because that 20K can just be the difference between settling to a guy that's on that fringe of top 8 and the one that's guaranteed.
It's good. Pig, have you got anything you want to add into the mix of that?
Yeah, I'm still a fan of I would like cover on every line, but it doesn't necessarily mean 4 green dots. Like Lawson Humphreys can cover 2 lines, and then Kruger can cover the other 2. So it could actually be 2 green dots as long as you've got the necessary DPP. So I'd still want to have a rookie cover on every line, just because, we get another 1 week Heaney suspension. You don't have to trade him. He can be covered. So yeah, maybe it's Kruger and Humphreys are literally covering all your bench slots. That's okay. If you've got the DPP, I would hate for someone to not have that swing and not have that cover. And then, you're copying a donut because of a Heaney backhand kind of thing. So, but as long as you've got that cover, given you've got that cover, yeah, get 102K guys and extract as much cash as you can.
Yeah,
it's how I'd go.
Yeah, some really good advice. Loved being able to, for those on YouTube, being able to watch and see you guys do your work. If you're listening to this on any of your audio podcasts, I hope you've been able to really extract some of the gold that these boys have been sharing for you on this strategy roundtable. Mini Monk, you have done more than a Callum Mills return. You, my friend, have given us a vice captaincy loophole 135 upon your return. Welcome back to the coaches panel after a little bit of a layoff. Nice to have you back on the podcast, my friend.
Good to be back on. Good to be back on.
And Big Mentality, fast becoming one of my favorite people to chat SuperCoach within the community. Just your ability to break down data and trends and then be able to put some narrative behind it as well is just one of my favorite things. Where can we get in touch with you across X? And tell us also where we can keep in touch with what you and the team are doing at Dr SuperCoach for the final few weeks of the season.
Yeah, we've still got a few things going. We still do our weekly recap podcast, which is on all the streaming platforms. You can find it wherever you get your normal podcasts. As you've alluded to throughout the podcast, MJ, I do a weekly captains video, which goes up on YouTube. Normally goes up on Wednesdays, but I've been in Melbourne until today, so it's going up tomorrow now. We've also got the Dr SuperCoach. There's Patreon things you can get involved with. We talked last time. There's a Slack with about 650 members where we just bounce off each other. Any ideas you want, talk about SuperCoach or other things. Like we got a book club, we got a running club, we got, people talk about Pokemon trading cards, whatever you want, it's in there. There's different tiers to the Patreon as well if you want to get more involved and more competitive, or if you just want to join a Slack to chat. And then we're all on Twitter as well. So the main page is at @Dr__SC and I'm at @Pig_DRSC.
If you missed any of those links, by the way, because he gave you about 17,
yeah,
we'll put them all for you in the description of this episode too. So if you've not found the great work that the guys at Dr SuperCoach are doing, whether it be the podcast, the video content, the Patreon, the Slack, or the great work that Pig Mentality himself is leading and driving in the community, we've put all the links in the description of this episode. So you can just go in there, click that, and those URL links will take you through there. Well, we wish you, friends, all the best of luck this week in SuperCoach. If you're heading into your final few weeks before your league finals, we hope this critical matchup goes your way. If rankings and a personal best is well and truly something that you're tracking towards, we certainly hope that the final trades or VC moves you make this week are the defining decision makers that get you there. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do it. But comment below and let me know what your VC and C options are this week. Get in before Pig Mentality drops his captain's video, so you can't quote the great man. You've got to go out on a limb and say them yourself. So if you're watching on YouTube, comment below and let us know. Hey, good luck this week. We hope it is kind to you. We'll be back again with you next week with another SuperCoach Strategy Roundtable.